When does thinking eliminate thinking? When does structure give you more freedom? Hi, I'm Eli's dad with Project Eli, where we educate, lead, and inspire. Today, we're going to answer those questions. So follow along with Eli and me as we have our discussion on how thinking can eliminate thinking and how structure gives you more freedom. Eli, if you want to have more freedom, one of the things you might want to do is look at people that have achieved excellence, because obviously they have the freedom to step away from the crowd. As we like to do frequently, let's take a look at, first we're going to look at some sports teams, then we're going to look at some everyday life, and also some things that you do so you can see the points and how it works, because this is stuff that you already know but aren't blind. Let's start with some sports teams. All right, let's go with my favorite team, of course, which is the Boston Celtics. Now, when I was just a puppy, really young, younger than you are right now, probably 8, 9, 10 years old, the Celtics won 11 championships in 13 years. Clearly, you can say that they had reached a level of consistent excellence. Now, here's the point. The Boston Celtics at that time had 7 plays. 7. They ran the same 7 plays for that whole period of time. Now, certainly the other teams that they were playing knew those 7 plays. They had film back then. They knew what was going on. They played against them. So how can you take the same 7 plays and reach a level of excellence? Here's the way you do it. You have, first of all, during your practices, you have structure. And in your structure, you go over these plays over and over and over and over. And what you do is you're creating muscle memory. The point is, you do your thinking in practice, where you drill, you practice, you rehearse, you do all your thinking then, your movements, what you're going to do, until it becomes muscle memory. At that point, when it becomes muscle memory, then you don't have to do any thinking at all. So what are you doing at that point during the game? Well, your muscles already know what they're going to do, so what you do is you focus on the defense, the person that's covering you. And if they respond, if they react one way, then you know what to do to take advantage of that. One of the things that we used to say in coaching in basketball is that offense is a reaction to defense. Let me give you a different example. Take Steph Curry as an example. I know he's one of your favorites. He shoots thousands and thousands and thousands of shots, so that when he's in the game, he's not thinking about how far do I have to shoot this or what. He's done all that. He's practiced all that. It's muscle memory. So what is he focusing on? He's focusing on the defenders, the people that are guarding him. And when he does that, he knows he can move this way and that way, and all he has to do is get a little bit of an edge. He sees the response, and because he has the muscle memory, because he's already done his thinking in practice, then his thinking is, how do I respond? If this guy moves this way, I'm going to move that way. And when he does that, it gives him the freedom to make moves that are out of the box moves. Now, one of the things that you have to admire when you watch Steph Curry play is when he shoots from the outside, he's a threat. So what happens? Guys close out on him and he drives to the basket. And when he drives to the basket, he goes in, around, he puts the ball up, and you wonder to yourself, my goodness, he makes it look so easy. He gets to the backboard and it spins, it goes in, and he'll be at the top of the board, it'll just drop down. And you've got to wonder to yourself, boy, that looks so easy, that looks so simple. How does he do that? When other players you see try and do the same thing and they don't do it. Here's the answer. He practices. He says to himself, all right, what are the different situations that are going to evolve during the game? And so he goes over and over and over, and he practices putting the ball at the top of the board very softly so it will drop down. He practices going underneath the basket and having the ball spin so it goes in the basket. So that when he's actually doing it during the game, he's not doing any thinking whatsoever. Let's take another sports analogy. Let's take the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers won 5 NFL championships in a row, including the first 2 Super Bowls. How did they do it? Essentially, they had one big play. It was called the Lombardi sweep, the power sweep. Coach Lombardi, he was very famous. They named the Super Bowl trophy after him, Lombardi Trophy. They had the same play year after year after year after year. The teams that they were playing all knew what the play was. So how come the play was so successful? Because he would drill, practice, rehearse his guys running that play, and they were so excellent at the execution of that play, they hadn't to do any thinking. All they had to do was do their job, and they would respond to how the defense was playing them, and then the guy with the ball would take a look, he'd run down the line, he'd see where the opening was, and he'd scoot through. Every time. That's how they won 5 consecutive championships. Let's move on to things that you know. Let's talk about traffic laws. How come we can get in our cars and, for the most part, drive safely? Because we have discipline. We know that when we get to a red light, we have to stop. When we get to a yellow light, most of the time, most of us slow down, anticipating the red light. What a lot of us do is they go through the red light, they go through the yellow light, and what happens then? Sometimes the guy on the side is anticipating the green light, he goes through the intersection, and that's when you have accidents. When the people do not have the discipline to do as they know they should be doing. Does that make sense? By the same token, having that same discipline, you're driving down the road and you hear the siren, the police car or the ambulance coming, and the siren's very loud. What do? You pull over to the right. Why? Because you know that you have to act outside of the box. You know that the law says you need to move to the right so that these vehicles can act above and beyond the law, because it's an emergency. It's an emergency situation. That's the discipline that you're taught as a driver. Without that kind of discipline, you can't get the big system to work for you. Something else that you know, when I see younger people pull out their phones and start texting, they're moving their fingers, it appears to me, like so fast. I say to myself, how can you do it so fast? That's unbelievable. Well, it's because you've done it over and over and over and over, and you're not thinking about it. Your fingers just move because your mind is telling them to move, as opposed to when I text, it's one letter at a time. All right, as one of my friends says, well, you got sausage fingers, that's why it takes you so long. All right, it's also familiarity. All right, so when you see when I see younger people pull out their phones and start and they go so fast with it, how did you get to that position? It's because you've done it so many times, that repetition. Let me give you a different example from when I was in school. Now, right now, everybody's got a laptop. But before there were laptops, we had typewriters. I remember one time you said to me, Dad, what's a typewriter? And I had to explain to you what it was, all right? And back in those days when I was in school, the professors demanded that you write your paper, that your papers all had to be typewritten. They all had to be typewritten. That was the rule, that was the law. And there was no getting around that. Why? Because people's handwriting can be hard to read, and the professors had so many papers to read, they said, I need to make sure that I can read it. So it had to be typewritten. So here's what the downside for somebody like me was, at that time in my life, I didn't know how to type. So there were a couple of girls that I knew, and they did this for a lot of people, that were unbelievably good typists. And what they would do is they would charge you by the page, like $2 a page or $3 a page or whatever it was, depending upon, you know, how well they knew you or so on, and they would type your papers for you. Now there was this one lady, her name was Lori, I believe. No, her name was Debbie, okay? Debbie, what Debbie would do is she would sit down to the typewriter and she'd be typing. And one day I walked up to her and I said, so Debbie, I see that he had a paper on the same subject that I did. Was it good? Was it nice? Was it a good paper? And she goes, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? You typed the whole paper. She said, I don't read the paper. What I do is I look at the letters and I type the letters exactly the way he has it, and I don't even read it. You want to talk about muscle memory? That's muscle memory. That's one of the ways that Debbie made some nice money back in the day in college. Let's talk a little bit about foreign basketball players. Now, in the NBA, we have a lot of foreign players coming in and they're doing a good job. Now, how come? Well, over in their countries, they're not focusing on doing like behind the back and dunking and all that kind of, what they focus on is fundamentals. You know, Eli, you have to remember that back when I was a kid, the pros didn't play in the Olympics. The college kids played in the Olympics. And we won game after game after game after game. We never lost a game, even with college kids. How come? And even though the other countries over there, especially Russia, they would take their players, and they weren't quote unquote professionals, but they lived in the same place. Oh, they practiced all year round, they got paid more, right? So they were essentially professionals playing against our college kids. How come our college kids always beat them? Because we were the ones that invented the game. Now, as they started to learn the fundamentals and improve more and more and more and more each year, they became better and better and better. And now it takes our pros to beat their pros. All right, so it's the fundamentals. What they focus on is not the fancy dancy stuff, because the fancy dancy stuff, that's great. It's fun to watch. It's entertaining. But what wins the game for you are the fundamentals. Beating your guy to the hoop and making the layup scores the same as coming in and doing a windmill jam. You know, it draws a lot of oohs and ahs, but there are more opportunities for beating a man one-on-one by quickness, or beating a man by blocking out, than there are for doing the windmill jam. Those are the plays that get shown on ESPN, but those aren't necessarily the plays that win the games. It's the fundamentals that win the games. Let's talk a little bit about sales. In sales, you know, people say, oh, he's a natural salesperson, he's talking, he's got the gift of gab. That's a bunch of hooey, Eli. Here's what makes a good salesperson, is the fundamentals. Is listening, is having the skills to listen, is having the skills to make your presentation, is asking questions, getting answers, and anticipating what your client is going to say. When you're selling one product, what happens? You get the same responses time after time after time after time. It's the same thing as when you walk up to somebody and you say, so how are you? What do they say? Fine. And you? You know the response you're going to get. Well, in sales, the same thing applies. You ask a question, you're going to, oh, I want to think it over. Oh, I can't afford it. You already know what the responses are going to be. So if you know what the responses are going to be, do you prepare yourself to answer those responses? Do you prepare yourself to be persuasive? All right, you sit there and you look like, oh, gee, I haven't heard that one before. Let me ask you this question, Mr. Client. If I were to show you, and then you go into your close, all right, that's the point I'm making, is the preparation, the drill, the practice, the rehearsal, the structure. It's the repetition. What you do repetitively is what you become great at. Now, as we've spoken about before, Einstein had a structured thinking time every single day. How do you become good at anything? By doing it repetitively. You become outstanding at what you repetitively do. Virtually all of your 5%ers have structured thinking time every single day. They meditate, they think, they give themselves that personal thinking time. And when you do, you become better at it. You become an outstanding thinker. What do you repetitively do every day? Aren't you very proficient in whatever that activity is? Have you chosen empowering activities or distracting, non-empowering activities? What is your morning routine? What is your daily routine? What is your bedtime routine? Have you even given any thought to these routines? If you haven't, if you don't have a structure, it's the structure, the discipline that gives you the freedom. Because when you can do something through muscle memory, then you're able to read and react. You can read the situation and react to it. You practice it, you think about it, you do it repetitively. That's how you become good at anything. Our thoughts for the day: success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. And that's from Jim Rohn. One more thought for the day. This is from Abraham Lincoln. Discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. Once again, that's President Lincoln. And because we never end our meetings on a philosophical note, let's get out there and charge! I'm Eli's dad.